I asked a grower, and he said it cost 70 cents at least to produce what was being sold for 9 cents.
Hello and welcome to Agri-Focus, brought to you by Agriland. I'm Stella Meehan, and today I'm joined by Chair of the newly formed Agri-Food Regulator, An Rialálaí Agraibhia, Joe Healy. So €2.5 million in funding has been provided for the Office of the Agri-Food Regulator, which is an independent body which has an aim of ensuring fairness and transparency in the food chain. The Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine has said that the office allows for price and market analysis functions and will become the state's enforcement authority for implementing rules on unfair trading practices. Niamh Lenihan was appointed as the CEO of the Agri-Food Regulator Office late last year, and a board has been selected, which is chaired by my guest, Joe Healy. Now, Joe is a dairy and cattle farmer from An Rialálaí in County Galway and is former president of both Macra and the Irish Farmers Association. He also served as the first vice president of Copa, the EU farming organisation. Welcome, Joe. Firstly, let's get down to basics when talking about the Office of the Agri-Food Regulator. Can you explain the context of this office being set up?
I suppose, thanks Stella for having me on. It's good to be here. It goes back a good few years ago. The Irish Farmers Association was lobbying for something of this nature. And then when I was elected president of the IFA in 2016, Commissioner Hogan set up an agri-markets task force. He was the then Commissioner for Agriculture. And that agri-markets task force was to see the need for something like more regulation around Europe. And as you say, it was to increase the level of fairness and transparency. And sometimes I think that equity might be a better word than fairness, because what's fair for one person mightn't be fair for another person, or mightn't be deemed fair. But anyway, that Agri-Markets Task Force reported back then probably a year and a half later. And out of that it grew. It obviously had to go through the different stages in Brussels, whether that was the Parliament or the Council or the Commission. And then it was transposed into law here in, I think, April 2021. The regulator was put in place last May, and the board, the regulator, the CEO, should I say, as opposed to the regulator, was put in place last May, and that's Niamh Lenihan, who you've already referred to. And the board was put in place and officially launched in December. And as you said, I was asked to be chair. So we're new, but as you say, it's about increasing the level of fairness and transparency, or increasing the efforts to ensure that there's more fairness and transparency, because we've often heard about, the producers talk about a greater and a fairer share of the consumer euro. And while there are two areas that we can't get involved in, and the legislation doesn't allow us to get involved in, and one of that is in relation to price, and the other one is in below cost selling. So there would be a lot of producers out there that below cost selling is a big thing for them. But there are two areas we can't get involved in. We would hope that any unfair trading practices that would be involved in the process of below cost selling, then we can get involved, provided that the producer contacts us and gives us the details. And you'd hope on the other side of it that the more transparency we bring as a board and as a regulator to the whole food chain, that the producer would have a greater knowledge of the markets and therefore would be able, in a stronger position, to dictate the price that they want to get and the price that the market is affording the buyer to pay them.
And I'll come to the detail, I suppose, of market analysis in a moment, but just to set the scene, as you mentioned there, in the context of how the office was set up, Joe, I suppose people think an office or a regulator, they think there is a regulator now. So a lot of people assume Niamh is the regulator, Niamh Lenihan. So she's the CEO of the Agri-Food Regulator Office.
Yes.
So it's an entire office and it will have a staff. So tell me then about the board. There's yourself and I think 7 other appointed members to the board. So what is your role we'll say, versus Niamh's role within that office?
Well, our role, I suppose, is around governance and around support, just to make sure that there's a strategy in place, that there's proper governance in place, um, and that Niamh and her team is supported. Um, there is allowance for up to 17 to be on the team. At the moment, that's at about 5, Niamh and 4 others. And our role is to ensure that they're supported. And I suppose to also act as agents of communication and knowledge for the board. And, we're on the ground. The other 7 and myself, we're on the ground meeting the people at various meetings. And if there are, we can highlight what we're about. And if there are issues that people want to raise with us, we're pretty well geographically spread around the country.
And you mentioned there about the remit of the Agri-Food Regulator in terms of legislation on unfair trading practices, Joe. So these regulations provide legal protection to suppliers of agriculture and food products against 16 specific unfair trading practices. So will the Regulator's Office be responsible for ensuring that all stakeholders along the supply chain are adhering to those best practices?
That's exactly. And if there's a business with over 50 million of a turnover, they're obliged to have a compliance officer for this area, and also to submit compliance reports or implementation reports to the regulator. And as you said, the regulator is the board really and the office, and Niamh is the CEO of that with the staff. But as you rightly say, lots of people think that the regulator is one individual person, but anyway, people will get used to that.
And as you said there, even though Niamh will be the CEO of the Agri-Food Regulator Office, you were saying that because the board is so geographically spread out that people can come to you if they have concerns or complaints. So has it somewhat of an ombudsman-like role there where people can come and make a complaint if they are concerned about unfair trading practices?
In a way, but I know that there was an issue in relation to the title ombudsperson, that regulator has a different power, if you want to call it like that. So it was felt that for this role in particular, that regulator was the proper title to give it. But just in relation to the board, I spoke to the UK ombudsperson, Christine Tickon, a few times, and we had her at meetings. And, she said that one of the biggest things, the biggest negatives that they had was in relation to people being afraid to come forward. The issues were out there, but people were afraid to come forward. So I think the whole area of confidentiality is very important. And obviously we ensure that. Now, if a court case, if a complaint leads its way up to a court case, well, then there is a time when that person who is making the complaint will have to forego their anonymity or else, just leave the complaint at that level, But
and who would be taking that court case? Would it be the Agri-Food Regulator who would take the case?
It would, on behalf of the supplier who would have made the complaint. And as you said, there are 16 unfair trading practices, and 10 of those are known as black areas, and the other ones are 6, and the 10 are absolutely prohibited under all circumstances. And an example of those is where there's a late payment of later than 30 days for perishable items, later than 60 days for non-perishable items, charging people for the likes of shelf space, charging them for advertising, returning goods unsold, and not paying for them, or cancelling order at short notice. They're just examples of the type of issues. And look, Stella, they're everyday issues, for people that are in sectors that have been affected.
I see. In terms then about pricing and market analysis, Joe, the Agri-Food Regulator has a function to publish analysis of information about prices and market data relating to the agri-food supply chain. So my understanding is that the regulator can seek data from businesses in this sense, but does that mean data about profit margins and things like that will be publicly available?
Well, I think in relation to market analysis, it's there's an awful lot of details and information in relation to market markets around the world. Like, we're a big exporting country. We export food, agri-food, to 180 countries around the world. For the second year in a row last year, that went over 16 billion, the largest indigenous sector. So, there's obviously a lot of information there, but it's to collate all that information and bring it all together, whether it's information from Borbia, from the Department of Agriculture, from the likes of Chagask, and it's to bring all that together. And I suppose, in a way, to work and to build a network and build a relationship with, when it's new here in Ireland, but it's also new in a lot of countries around Europe, because it's a new directive from Brussels, and it's to build a relationship with those countries as well, so that if we have difficulty maybe in a country getting information, that we have an organisation similar to ourselves there that we can work through, and put all that together and get it out. And also working with the businesses, whether that's the producers, the retailers, the processors, the wholesalers, people in the food service sector, to get as much information as we can together to make it user friendly, accessible and understandable, and to get that information out there then to the suppliers or whoever wants to see it. It'll be there available for everyone, so that people doing deals, that they're doing it based with knowledge, as much knowledge as they can have.
So there are two questions that have arisen since the announcement of the Agri-Food Regulator Office and the appointments to it, that have come from particularly our audience. So on one side of it, it's from the farmer or the producer supplier side, and on the other side of it, then it's from the agri-businesses or the large retailer side. First of all, I'll go and I'll look at it from the perspective of the producers and the suppliers. Farmers want to know, like, basic question: what is the Agri-Food Regulator Office going to do for them in the terms of the prices that they get paid for their produce? As you said at the beginning, what's fair to one person, is it fair to another? I mean, it is subjective. But at the end of the day, for years now, and you will have known this through your, agri-politics over the years as well, for years you will have various sectors saying, that they don't feel that there's correct pricing going on, that there's not a fair price being given, that in certain circumstances they'd even claim, the likes of cartels and things like that. So can the Agri-Food Regulator in practice do anything for the prices paid to suppliers?
Indirectly, we would be hoping. Directly, no. Indirectly, we'd be hoping that we would. As I said at the start, we can't get involved in price, and the legislation doesn't allow us to get involved in below cost selling either. The only place that we can get involved in there is if below cost selling leads on to an unfair trading practice back to the farmer. So they're kind of straightforward answers there. We would hope indirectly that the knowledge or that the market analysis that we would bring to the table, that would be comprehensive and understandable, that knowledge would put the supplier in a stronger position, knowing what's out there and the prices that consumers are paying, and hopefully kind of how it's broken down along the way, because we all know what the consumers are paying. We all know what the farmer gets. It's that grey area in the middle that we want to try and bring as much clarity and information to as possible. And that's in relation to from once it leaves the farmer's yard until it arrives on the shelf at the retailer and what the consumer pays. So there's the area there involving the processors and the retailers. So a key job for us will be to try and get as much information as we can to the processors from the processors and retailers. And we've already started work along that way in relation to meeting those people. And it's not a case of, we're not out to get them. All we want to ensure is that there's fairness along the way. People will talk about, we'll just take wasn't it the Brussels sprouts there immediately after Christmas?
Yeah.
For 9 cents. I asked a grower, and he said it cost 70 cents at least to produce what was being sold for 9 cents. Now, the retailer will tell us that they bear the cost of that. It's to kind of marketing and it's advertising and it's to get foot flow through the shop, through the store. And that they bear the cost of it. We want to try and ensure that there's no cost going back to the farmer on that. And if there is, that's an unfair trading practice. That's where we can get involved.
Oh yeah, so that's literally where I was going to lead with that next question, is that how can the Agri-Food Regulator Office stop any sort of situation where below cost selling in a supermarket or price cuts within large retailers would be filtered back then to the price paid to suppliers? That would be considered a UTP, and the office could get involved then. Is that it?
It can get involved provided it qualifies as an unfair trading practice. And I suppose the key there, Stella, and I have to be honest about this, but the key area there is, how do you confirm that it's an unfair trading practice? They say that they're taking the hit on it, but without a doubt, and we all know that it eventually falls back to the farmer, to the supplier, in the sense that the next time that they go back to do a deal, it's indirectly it's factored into the price. But it's how do they cover themselves there? But if there is an unfair trading practice anywhere along the line, and I would urge the farmers and the suppliers, and what constitutes a supplier, to look through the clauses, the black ones and the grey ones, to make sure that they are aware of what qualifies as unfair trading practices. But I want to be clear again, that in relation to setting prices and below cost selling, the legislation doesn't allow the regulator to get involved. But we have many examples over the years of unfair trading practices where any one or a number of the other 16 clauses were committed, and then we can get involved in that.
I know a lot of farmers and suppliers and producers might think that below cost selling is despicable, and I'm not here to argue one or the other, but it's not illegal. They're not doing anything wrong. It is a marketing commercial tool for retailers and processors, whatever how they might feel about it. As you said, that's why the office can't get involved, because they're not doing anything that's unfair trading practice in terms of below cost selling.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's probably about 4 years ago now, I was at a meeting and I heard Board B state that research showed that, someone going into a supermarket, and if they put meat in their basket, they on average spend 4 times more than the person that has no meat in their basket. So, that's how very often you see meat can be discounted by 33%, 50%. That drives beef farmers crazy, because it does indirectly affect the market back the way. But if there's no unfair trading practice committed there, well, then it's not an area that we can get involved in. We would hope that the more transparency we bring to the marketplace and the more knowledge we bring to it, the less likely the likes of that is going to happen.
Then the other side of the coin, the questioning that we're getting, and a little bit of apprehension or, I suppose, worry and maybe fear, is on the agri-business side of it, or the retailer or the processor side of it. That if the Agri-Food Regulator is requesting information, like, obviously they'll be doing, larger ones will be doing their compliance reports and so on. But they fear that a lot of information is commercially sensitive. And then they are wondering if the information sought by the Agri-Regulator is published or anything like that. Are there consequences? Are they right to be concerned about commercial sensitivity, or, can they provide this information and it be protected in some ways?
Well, we're very conscious of that, because that has come up at every meeting we've had with any of those. So, we're very clear that we won't be putting that information out into the public arena. And we've spoken to them about that, and I think overall they're fairly clear and they're fairly satisfied. That stuff that they wouldn't be putting out, it won't be going out into the public arena.
Okay, and then originally the minister said, when the office was implemented, or at least certainly in the beginning when it was mooted, the agriculture minister had said that the office of the Agri-Food Regulator would have real teeth. So what exactly does that mean? Because I think sometimes there's no more skeptical a community in this country than the farming community, and they don't really know or understand or believe that anything will come of it, that it might just become another Quango, it might become another office that, talks a talk, but nothing actually changes. What do you think the minister meant when he said it will have real teeth?
Well, look, and I agree with you. I'm a farmer myself. I brought a calf into this world about 10 minutes before this interview, or before I left the house to do this interview. And like time is precious, so there's no point in getting involved in a grouping or an organization that you don't feel that you can make a positive impact. And without real teeth, this would qualify as one of those. But I think it has real teeth. There's the opportunity there to carry out on-the-spot investigations. There's the opportunity there to ensure that certain information that's asked for from whether it's farmers or whether it's retailers or processors, that they have to give it. And there's an opportunity there to issue court proceedings, and those court proceedings can lead to fines of as high as 10 million or up to 10% of annual turnover. So that, those fines initially were mooted to be a lot smaller. But like that's significant if it comes to it. And again, it's a case of that the regulator office, we don't see our role as bringing retailers to court or bringing processors or bringing suppliers to court. We see it there to bring clarity to the food chain and to bring more fairness to it. And the easier that can happen, the better for everyone. Very often you hear people saying there are no winners in court cases. But if it has to be done, I'm sure, we will do it. And if the reasons are there to go that far, we're willing to do that. But in the meantime, we want to just work with them, let them know what we're all about. And that's what the likes of the webinar and meetings that we run are for, to make sure that everyone is clear on the role of the regulator, and the more clarity that's there, the better chance we have of bringing equity and fairness to the food chain.
And finally, Joe, just to ask you before we finish up on it, the stage it's at now, I know that the Office of the Regulator is kind of chatting and in consultation with stakeholders along the supply chain now, and a lot of, I suppose, retailers and processors too. So are we at the stage yet, or are we close to the stage where the Agri-Food Regulator office is working in earnest now in terms of like looking into things along the supply chain, or is it still in the sort of formation and setting up sort of phase of its development?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bit of both, because as I said, the CEO has been in place since last May, so quite a bit of work has been done there. So we were starting with a bit of a lead on the 6th of December when the board was set up. It was great to be able to just take up the work that she was doing. But like some of the other work is just started now in relation to the strategy, in relation to the work plan, in relation to governance. But the other work is going on, as you say, the interaction with the various links in the food chain, and looking into a couple of complaints that are there already.
And if somebody is listening and they are concerned on any end of the agri-food supply chain today, and they don't really know, they weren't sure about the Agri-Food Regulator, whether it's set up yet, they don't really know where to go, what would your best advice to them be, Joe?
Well, look, they can get in contact with me or any of the board or the chief executive, or go onto our website. So that information is there. We're based in Backweston. That's where our office is. So, there's no problem getting in touch with any of us.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Joe. That's Joe Healy there, the chair of the established Agri-Food Regulator office. And thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Agri-Focus today. But do like and review the podcast if you get it on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and share it with anyone you think might be interested. You can also click on the podcast tab on the Agriland app on your smartphone, or go on the website and just click on podcasts and you can listen to it there too. Thank you for listening. Until next time, goodbye and take care.